This program, of course, is presented by Pro Wrestling Illustrated, the most widely read, widely sold, and respected wrestling magazine in the world today.
This is the Pro Wrestling Illustrated Podcast. I'm your host, PWI senior writer Al Castle. Back again. I'm going to be joined in a moment by my co-host, Brian Solomon, and we have got a lot to talk about. With Fastlane out of the way, we've got a clearer picture of what WrestleMania 37 is looking like. We're going to talk a bit about the card as we know it so far, and also just some of the logistics of this year's WrestleMania, the return of live fans, doing it in Tampa, outdoors, over 2 days. But again, really kind of focusing on this card, which a lot of folks think is a little underwhelming, leaves a lot to be desired. A lot of the real key names that we've come to associate with WrestleMania, the real star power, folks like The Undertaker and John Cena and Brock Lesnar and others, nowhere to be found on this card. And so they're kind of piecing it together with what they have. And Brian and I will kind of evaluate what the card is looking like and whether it is, in fact, WrestleMania worthy. Also talk a bit about some other news, including Andrade's departure, and talk about the return of the NWA, the National Wrestling Alliance, which was on hiatus for about a year because of COVID, back over the weekend with their first pay-per-view, Back for the Attack, and now back on the Fight TV network with the return of their weekly show, Power. We talk a bit about the changes they've undergone over the last year, some for the better, some for the worse. So stay tuned. And then later on, got a really fun interview that you could read some of in the latest issue of Pro Wrestling Illustrated. It's our hot seat interview, and it's with WWE official, I think that's his official title, Adam Pearce. But if you know Adam, you know his career goes back a lot further than just being a WWE official. He's a former NWA champion. He was a star in Ring of Honor. He was a booker for Ring of Honor. Has worn many hats and was brought into WWE some years ago, even though he never really worked there. I guess he did a few enhancement matches back in the day, but earned such a good reputation, especially for his work backstage, that he was brought in as a coach, and over the last several months has become something of an on-screen star who's gotten really a lot of praise just for the little bit of time he's been on TV. Really conveys a legitimacy, that you don't see in a lot of performers. And Adam talks a bit about what's behind that, his road to getting in WWE, and generally how much fun he's having these days in this kind of late stage in his career, getting in some ways more notoriety than he did in all the years he was wrestling, and also talks a little bit about WrestleMania coming up and what he hopes to see there. So stay tuned. And let me tell you about the latest issue of Pro Wrestling Illustrated. It is the May 2021 issue. In addition to my hot seat interview with Adam Pearce in there. There is a ton in this issue. It is the return of the Supercards, which was a staple of Pro Wrestling Illustrated for many, many years in the 80s and 90s, where we will highlight some of the biggest cards in wrestling that happened over a certain period of time. And Kevin McElvaney, our editor, made the call to bring it back and really chose just the right time to do it, because there is so much covered in here, from Wrestle Kingdom to AEW's New Year's Smash show, the Royal Rumble, Impact's Hard to Kill show, Ring of Honor's Final Battle show, and on and on. Loads of cards in here, tons of coverage, photos that you haven't seen anywhere. Really, in some ways, kind of a throwback to the old Pro Wrestling Illustrated, where for a lot of people, it was how they got their news about results for some of these shows, and the first time they got eyes on some of these stars from promotions that they otherwise wouldn't see. And there's a lot of that here, with in addition to some of those real prominent companies like WWE, AEW. We've also got coverage of shows from Mexico, from Japan, and it's absolutely worth checking out. A really fun feature, and I think a collector's issue because of that. So go and pick it up. Lots more in this issue. All the columns you're used to. we talk a bit about, and I keep on saying we got to have a conversation here on the show about this, some changes in our world title status, recognition. We've got looked at features on Masha Slamovich, on indie wrestler Jamie Senegal, and a lot more. So you want to pick up this issue, go to PWI-online.com. You could either buy just the one issue, or you could subscribe. And that's the case for either the print edition or the digital edition. The digital edition gets to you a lot faster. You don't have to wait those extra few weeks to have it come in your mailbox or to find it at a newsstand. And the digital edition is customized for your digital device. But certainly, if you want the magazine, we've been around now 40 plus years. And we certainly encourage you to go and pick it up. But again, rather than going crazy trying to find it at a newsstand, have it delivered right to your mailbox. It's the way to go. You could subscribe and save more than half off the cover price. So go to PWI-online.com and pick it up. While you're there, you can subscribe to the PWI weekly newsletter, which is absolutely free, comes to your inbox, has news, ratings, notes. It's got links to stuff like the podcast and other projects that we're working on. Just a real fun weekly feature. It costs you absolutely nothing, so you want to do that. Also, pick up a t-shirt at prowrestlingtees.com. And we also now have a partnership with a company. Their website is whatamaneuver.net, and we've got some exclusive designs over there, including a Matt Brock Squad t-shirt and Pro Wrestling Illustrated logo t-shirt on a pastel colored, really cool, perfect for Easter, I would think. So go check it out. Subscribe to the podcast wherever you get your podcasts. Please leave us a positive review. And what else? You could reach us here at the podcast at pwipodcast@outlook.com, or for anything else, send us an email at pwi@kappapublishing.com. And of course, follow us on social media at official PWI on Instagram and Twitter. Had fun, as always, live tweeting Fastlane over the weekend. And if you like, you can follow me on Twitter at AlCastlePWI. All right, joined right now by my co-host, Brian Solomon. How's it going, Brian?
Pretty good, Al. Hope everything's okay on your end.
Yes, a busy weekend in the wrestling world. A fun one, though. We got the NWA back, and between the NWA and Fastlane, my Sunday was pretty booked up. So let's talk a couple things. Obviously, the biggest news, WrestleMania, and what we now know about WrestleMania coming out of Fastlane. We've got the semblance of a card taking shape. I think there's about 8 matches so far. Because it's over 2 nights, I expect we're going to get a lot more. You know, last year I think they had 19 or 20 matches over the 2 nights. So this is probably only about half the card right now. But it does seem like at least the bigger parts are in place now. And they've even gone as far as actually telling us what's on night 1 and what's on night 2 for the most part. So let's talk a bit about it. I think as far as WrestleMania goes, the biggest news coming out of Fastlane is an apparent change in the main event, a main event you and I have talked about, which I think we both said we liked. And I guess Vince McMahon liked it less than we did because he went and changed it. Edge and Roman Reigns now seems to be, and maybe by the time folks are hearing this, it's already official, looks like it's changing to a triple threat with Daniel Bryan thrown into the mix. What are your thoughts on this? I mean, is it an improvement? You know, I don't know if you're like me, by and large, not a huge fan of triple threats. I mean, very often the action is better, but inevitably the story takes a hit. That said, there are certainly cases where WWE has done an effective job of building a 3-way rivalry. You know, a couple of years ago with Charlotte, Ronda, and Becky Lynch. I thought that was a really good job of building a 3-way rivalry. They've kind of started to do that here. So in the end, could this be better than what was originally planned?
Well, as you know, I've said it before. I mean, I don't really care for triple threats, especially when you're talking about the main event of WrestleMania. I really always feel like the main event of WrestleMania needs to be this very clean, very direct, you know, one-on-one, good versus evil or whatever the case may be. And they're really muddying the waters here. I think what they did with Edge at the pay-per-view really muddies the waters. Did he turn? What exactly is going on? The whole comeback story that I championed coming out of the Royal Rumble as a justifiable reason to put Edge in this spot is now, in my mind, not as clear, because that doesn't seem to be the story that they want to tell anymore. I loved the Daniel Bryan Roman Reigns match that they had. I thought it was the highlight of the entire day of wrestling, both shows. But I feel like to throw him in there, it almost feels like a lack of confidence in the original match. I always feel like when they wind up switching to a triple threat in midstream, it shows me a lack of confidence in the original matchup. And having someone like Daniel Bryan in there, it's almost like he's the ringer to make sure that it's a really good match for whatever reason that they didn't think it would be.
Yeah, I really agree. And the one thing that I think you and I both talked about that we really liked about Edge versus Roman Reigns was that it was such a clear good guy and bad guy, and not just in the storytelling, but I think in the reception. I mean, my expectation was, they're in Tampa Bay and folks watching from homes, they were going to be very much behind Edge in capturing that title, telling the whole Cinderella story in his comeback and all that, and very against Roman Reigns in as much as they've done a terrific job building him up as a heel. So what do they go and do? As you said, they kind of muddy it up. And now is Edge even a babyface? Is he a heel? Is it something in between? We have another babyface in the mix. I just don't get it. What does it tell you? Is it a lack of confidence in the job that Edge was doing? Is it maybe not Vince McMahon not buying the chemistry between the two of them?
I think it might be a lack of confidence in Edge's ability to perform, and I'm not saying that it's justified, but I'm thinking there may be more to this than we know. Maybe
in workouts or whatever, maybe something's just missing. Yeah.
There might be fears behind the scenes of, oh my God, this is the biggest match on the biggest show of the year. Can this guy really carry this? Because there's certainly no doubt about Roman Reigns being able to do it. So if there is doubt, to me, it has to be coming from the Edge side of things, and it's almost like they're thinking in their head, wow, I wish we could have just had Daniel Bryan versus Roman Reigns as our WrestleMania main event, but now we're stuck with that. That seems to be the feeling I'm getting now.
Yeah. And the other thing, when you have a triple threat, which and the champion, a strong champion that often is kind of baked into the reason of why you do it, is it's a way of getting a title off of someone without beating them. And I wonder if that's in play here. We just saw that with Bobby Lashley losing the was it the Intercontinental title or the U.S. title? I forget which he had. I think it was the U.S. title, right? Back at Elimination Chamber to Riddle without having to take the pinfall. So could that be it? Could they maybe want to get the title either on Edge or Bryan, but don't want Roman to suffer a pinfall loss? And maybe that's in play here. I could very much believe that from a match quality standpoint, this will be better. But, the poster, right? It's just a little more cluttered when you got 3 guys instead of 2. That's in all combat sports, that iconic image is the stare down, right? One guy looking nose to nose with the other. And they, I thought, were doing a really good job of telling that story between Edge and Roman Reigns. A couple of takeaways here. One is the timing issue, right? And this has been sort of botched from the moment that Edge won the Royal Rumble, where clearly the direction they wanted to go was Roman Reigns, but they had this whole way to get there and 2 pay-per-views between now and then, and they just seem to have kind of gotten distracted, lost interest, what have you. And a part of it is a testament to Daniel Bryan, I think, doing such a good job that maybe it got Vince McMahon thinking, as you said, well, this is actually pretty good stuff. Maybe this is worth playing out more. But if there was more of a straight line between the Royal Rumble and WrestleMania, I don't know. It's kind of a shame.
I don't think it's a total loss. Happy to see, watching the show this past Sunday night and assuming that Daniel Bryan was not going to win, and assuming that the match was still Edge and Roman Reigns. And one of the things that was going through my mind was, what do you do with Daniel Bryan at WrestleMania? He needs something really good. I mean, he's so good. I'd hate to see him wasted in a mid-card match. So in that sense, I'm happy to see the guy get a, and it's sort of going to be the true main event, because it is going to be, I think, the closing match on night 2. But another kind of, I don't want to say tough break for Edge, but this whole thing couldn't have gone the way he wanted.
Yeah, because it's like what they did, the Daniel Bryan match and the whole Fastlane angle, it almost seemed like this unnecessary kind of bump in the road, and let's just get this over with and get back to building WrestleMania. And now it seems to have taken over WrestleMania, this Daniel Bryan angle, which I didn't see coming. I just saw it as, this is something to keep Roman Reigns busy for a month, and now it's turned into a lot more. And I don't know. I don't like to gang up on WWE if I don't think they deserve it. But, when people talk about how it seems like sometimes they've lost their fundamental ability to tell these very simple, straightforward stories, this is an example of that. This is a slam dunk. It's an easy story to tell.
Yeah. And I think some of that is apparent throughout the whole card. So let's take a step back and talk about what we know we have. So night 1 right now, the main event looks to be Bobby Lashley versus Drew McIntyre for WWE Championship. We talked a bit about that. I think a fine match. I wouldn't have predicted this to be a WrestleMania main event caliber match, but it's fine. Sasha Banks and Bianca Belair for the Women's Championship. Bad Bunny versus The Miz. A little surprising that it looked like this was going to be a tag team match, and it looks like they're going to go ahead and do the singles match, but with the other two, I imagine, involved. The night 2, Reigns, Edge, and ostensibly Daniel Bryan. Asuka and Rhea Ripley, that coming together last night on Raw with Rhea debuting, and Bray Wyatt and Randy Orton. We can talk a little bit more about that in a moment. And then 2 other matches that we don't know when they're happening. New Day and AJ Styles and Omos, and Braun Strowman versus Shane McMahon. That's supposed to have happened this past Sunday, but they pushed it off to the pay-per-view, which I kind of figured that feels like more of a WrestleMania match than a Fastlane match. But that's kind of it. And man, that is not a very strong card at all, I would say. And the big guns that they typically pull out for WrestleMania really just don't seem like they're available or in the mix at all. I mean, when you talk about Undertaker, Goldberg, Brock Lesnar, John Cena, I guess Cena's still kind of a possibility, but he has indicated that he's not going to be there because he's taping in Canada. He's filming his show. If you don't have any of those, I mean, I know Hogan is a host, but I wouldn't expect much out of that. Man, one of my takeaways from this is that not just WWE's roster, but even kind of their pool of special attractions having dwindled as much as it has really is an indictment in the way, not just that they elevate talent now, but the way they've done it now for a generation, in that now their part-timers that they call on, a lot of them have kind of aged out too. And you don't, the last sort of generation to create like these special attractions, you kind of can't go to that well anymore. And then that next generation, which is really, the stars of the last 15 years, basically the John Cena generation, the reason that those folks aren't really available to bring in as special attractions is they're still, just regular parts of the company. You're talking Randy Orton. I thought Edge was a fine special attraction for this year's WrestleMania, but they've kind of already squandered it. Now he's just another guy and part of a 3-way match. So there really aren't those special attractions to go to.
Yeah, and more we're seeing, I think, very much so, the era of the diminishment of the importance of the individual drawing cards. I mean, think about this. In an era when you've got 2 nights worth of WrestleMania, you have one of the weakest cards ever. And you could look back on, some of the greatest WrestleManias of all time ever, and they got it in under 3 hours. Do you know what I mean? So we're looking at a situation where it's almost like, it's like what people predicted. We have this guaranteed money. We've got the Fox money. We've got our TV deals. We've got Peacock money now. We've got the network. We don't have to worry. We don't have to worry about buy rates. We can sort of coast a little bit. The pressure is not as much on to pull out these dream matches for WrestleMania. I may be wrong in saying that, but what we're seeing play out here, to me, is an indication of that.
Yeah. This is, like I said, probably only about half of the total matches we're going to get over 2 nights, and this isn't enough to flesh out one good WrestleMania card. I'd argue this would be a mediocre SummerSlam card. It might be fine for a SummerSlam or something like that, but again, this is I think 8 matches announced so far, and it's just not strong at all. And you still have a lot more to put in here. Is there anything that they could do? I mean, are there any rabbits to pull out of the hat? And the challenge is that the bigger names that they have on the regular roster right now seem to all be booked. So you got a match for Drew McIntyre and for Roman Reigns and Edge and Daniel Bryan and AJ Styles. They're all on the card. So you'd think that what's left to put together is going to be, your Intercontinental title match, your U.S. title match, that kind of thing. But is there a rabbit that they could pull out of their hat for this card?
Well, what about the Brock Lesnar rabbit? I know
I don't know. What would you do with him?
Yeah, and I mean, I know maybe I have this reputation as the Brock Lesnar guy. My answer to every problem is Brock Lesnar, but I do think he is the most special thing in wrestling in the last 10 to 20 years. He just is.
I agree. You think that he would have been paired with one of the people who's already booked. I mean, what are you going to do with him? Put him with, Dolph Ziggler or something? I mean, right.
I wish I knew. I mean, that might be something Cena could do if they could get Cena involved.
Yeah, but
that he's trying to make up for, the worst trouncing of his entire career, something like that.
See, I think if you got Cena to do the show and you got Lesnar to do the show, I'd think they'd be in separate matches, so you get more bang for the buck, right?
But that's how you water down the card. What you're describing is exactly how you water down a card, which is what you don't want to do.
But they tend to stay away from having part-timers work against each other because nothing is gained, right? Whoever comes out, the winner, who gets the rub. I mean, they both kind of go back to their neutral corners, and WWE's none the better for it. I'd sooner do and I do not want to see this, but just theoretically speaking, because they've kind of teased this for years over WrestleMania, John Cena versus Elias, which somehow again has been kicking around the WrestleMania cards for years, and a Brock Lesnar. I don't know what you do with the Brock Lesnar. I mean, I don't know. You could just have him kill someone. I don't know. And it gets
There's also there was an announcement today, and I'm not going to say this is not something that would turn WrestleMania around and make it into the greatest event ever. But and you talk about part-timers and special attractions and guys coming back. They announced today that RVD is going in the Hall of Fame.
Oh, I didn't know that. That's news to me.
Now,
okay.
Yeah, they announced it today. And RVD is now, he's not with Impact anymore as of last fall. He has some kind of a deal or an agreement with WWE. I'm not sure what it is, to do things with them. I don't exactly know what that entails. But now he's going in the Hall of Fame. He's totally in working condition. He can go. Maybe he's somebody they throw in the mix there just to spice it up a little bit.
Yeah, I suppose. I mean, he didn't mean a whole lot to an Impact. So how much is he going to mean to to WWE. Now, in some ways, I guess he would mean more to WWE because he's got more of a history there. But yeah, he's not that much of a difference maker. And thinking of other guys who are not on the card yet, Jeff Hardy, Riddle, Sheamus. Looks like those two might be paired together, Riddle and Sheamus. Just going through the card. Yeah, it's tough. It's a tough one. And you know, not to jump too far ahead, but another headline that came out of this week, which I don't want to exaggerate, it left my jaw dropping, but in terms of missed opportunities, you know, word came out this week that they released Andrade, or they granted his request to be released. And at the same time that, again, you're struggling to put together a card and looking over your roster, and there's just this dearth of star power. It's crazy to me that they let him go. I think it's great that they let him go if they've got nothing for him. I mean, to keep him around just to sort of hold him hostage. But in terms of missed opportunities, man, did they blow that one. I thought Andrade had huge star potential and still does, and he's in his early 30s. You know, we've talked about, you know, one of these issues being that the roster is so old. Here you have a guy who was relatively young, had so much going for himself, great look, good size, charisma. Obviously working against him was the language barrier. I think too much is made of that. You know, you would know this as well as anybody with your studying of old wrestling. You know, that's what mouthpieces are for. That's what managers are for. He had a good one in Zelina Vega. So kind of crazy that they let not just Andrade, but Zelina already having been gone, that this act is just floating out there for another company to take. And to me, that's a main event act. I mean, they could go over to AEW and be headlining next week.
And from what I understand, right, and this tells me that they don't even recognize the potential, is the fact that I don't believe he even had a non-compete.
Right.
So he could just go on Dynamite next week, you know, and if he's smart, he probably will, or something like that. Yeah, because I mean, for me, it was all about the creative. Like, they never did anything with him ever that made me personally interested in him, but it was not his fault. It was just that they just never seemed to have anything good for him, especially since he's been on his own.
Yeah. What a huge missed opportunity there.
Yeah.
But just go through some more names. Big E's not booked. I don't know. I imagine maybe they do something with Apollo. If they continue that going, there seems to be some life left in that feud. Rey Mysterio, Seth Rollins, I imagine is going to be paired with Cesaro. But oof, yeah, this is and it is kind of a weird thing because on one hand, they received criticism over the years at WrestleMania for slotting so many special attractions, part-timers in the card, but this year they don't have it, and they're kind of missing that. But I think it's less just that you miss the star power of the special attractions to part-timers, and more just an indictment that this is because you haven't created your stars within your roster. So Seth Rollins and Cesaro, two super talented guys. You know, Cesaro, one of the more underrated and underutilized guys of the last several years. So on one hand, you know, great that he gets what would seem to be kind of a featured match at WrestleMania, but the reality is this is not going to be an important match because he hasn't been pushed. So it's, you know, I imagine they're going to get 8 to 12 minutes in the middle of one of these shows, and it's just not going to mean a whole lot.
Yeah. I'm also thinking maybe, what about Kurt Angle? There's a name we haven't brought up. What's his situation looking like?
Well, he's technically retired, right? You know, having I don't know what that's worth, but you know, another guy who's either 50 or right around there. You know, one name that I'm surprised that they haven't gone to because he's kind of always available is Triple H. You know, he's kind of like the resident special attraction that they can always go to if they need to. So that's something. But really, again, now we're 3 weeks away, more or less. I just don't see any of that coming together. I feel like they're kind of where now they just build the stories that they have for the next few weeks, flesh out that mid card, and this is kind of what it is. Do you think they're, because of the limitations and the restrictions of putting on this WrestleMania, they're, I don't want to say deliberately tanking it, but it's kind of like, the rebuilding year, as they say for like baseball teams. This year we're going to kind of take off, and we're going to look to Dallas next year, and that's when we load up with The Rock and Roman Reigns, and we got Steve Austin in Dallas, and we'll bring back Brock and all of that. And again, this year it's sort of like, well, people are just going to be happy to have people in a stadium. Kind of doesn't matter what you give them.
Maybe. I mean, even if they're not consciously doing that, that might be sort of like, the kind of underlying theme of this, that is just sort of like, well, because of what's happening right now, people will just be happy that we're giving them anything. Maybe that's the thinking. But the sad part is, as with anything else, they have the ability to do a whole lot more. This has never been, ever, a talent issue. Never. Their roster's unbelievable. It still is, especially with all three, if you consider all three brands. It's 100% a creative problem.
Yeah, absolutely. And even this card tells some of that story, because you look at people who are on the roster who are available to them and are either not booked, you don't really expect to be booked, or kind of underutilized. Rey Mysterio, AJ Styles, who's in a tag team match, Ricochet, Jeff Hardy, who at one point was one of the biggest stars in the entire sport, and on and on. These guys are available, and just aren't really. And it's not now a matter of just sticking them on the card, because you could do that. You could find a match for Jeff Hardy or Rey Mysterio or whoever tomorrow, and maybe they will end up on the card, but it's just finding a meaningful place for them. And it just doesn't look like that's going to happen between now and WrestleMania. So we'll see. Any other thoughts on just kind of the overall plan here? 2 nights. We now know around 25,000 folks a night inside the building. A lot of events on television, but it doesn't look like there's going to be much, if any, live events leading up to or after the show. So it looks like essentially after WrestleMania, they go right back to the Thunderdome for at least the foreseeable future. So what do you think about the way WrestleMania is taking shape from a production standpoint?
Such a negative Nancy today, but I don't think that this 2-night thing as a permanent idea is a good one. And I don't know why they're doing it. I really don't. There's probably a very simple reason that I'm not seeing, but this isn't a buy rate thing. This isn't like you can get twice the buy rate or a slightly higher buy rate or anything like that. Of any point in history, you would think this would be the least likely time to try something like this. I mean, and the least likely event, because look, WrestleMania is a mainstream entertainment event. There are people, lots of people, who watch WrestleMania that don't even watch wrestling the rest of the year. Those people are not going to sit down 2 straight nights to watch this. And they're going to watch one. They're going to be confused. They're not going to get the full picture. They're going to get a weekend card. And you've got like the people throw parties. I mean, these are all the logistics. Like, are they thinking of all this? Are people going to have 2-night WrestleMania parties where, okay, everybody, see you tomorrow? I think this is very ill-advised and bloated for them to think they could sustain this. I think it's almost like I don't know. It kind of is a sign to me of some kind of desperation in some way. And I just think that it's a bad move. It's a bad move. It's the same way I felt years and years ago that the entire brand extension was a bad move, because you're watering everything down. You're breaking it apart for no reason, for no discernible benefit. And I feel the same thing with this.
I'm not as down on it for a few reasons. I'm not sure if I love it. A bit of a disclosure here. I'm planning on going both nights, so we'll see what that's like. But I do think that there's a couple of factors here. One is, again, the pandemic, right? So they want to sell tickets. They want to make revenue. You have, I mean, somewhat self-imposed because they're in Florida. They could kind of do what they want. But good for them. They are, I guess, trying to keep it to a size of an audience that they feel will be safe. So I guess they're talking about 25,000 people in the building each night. You double that, you sell 50,000 tickets instead of 25,000. So that's one motivator, right?
I thought of that, but then you've also got twice the production costs.
You do, but it's probably not twice the production cost, right? I mean, it's probably some increase, but it's not like you're tearing down and setting back up again. So, right, I mean, you're paying everybody for a second day, all your production crews, but I don't think it doubles the production cost, and you do double the ticket revenue. Now, in the big picture, it's probably not all that much. I mean, I was actually surprised by how sort of reasonably priced the WrestleMania tickets were. I thought that there was potential here for them to really kind of fleece the fans because it is such a kind of, you would think it's a hot ticket, the first live WWE event in more than a year. I thought that they were going to just charge through the roof for all these tickets, and they didn't. So I don't expect them to actually make a ton of money off of ticket revenue. The other thing, obviously, is Peacock, right? And so by then they're going to be firmly over on Peacock, and they need to deliver attractions to Peacock to kind of justify what NBC spent on them. And 2 nights of WrestleMania programming, even if neither one is going to do the kind of numbers that one WrestleMania would have done on its own on one night some years ago, it's going to be the most watched WWE event on Peacock, I would imagine, for all of 2021. And 1 and 2 are going to be night 1 and night 2. So that's some reasoning. And I don't know. I do think that some of this is just borrowing from New Japan, and they did it. Yeah. The flip side of that is I was complaining for years, and having gone to WrestleMania 34 and 35, I know those went way, way, way too long. Now, there's also the option of just make a shorter show on one night. But if you are, dead set on, producing 8 hours of WrestleMania or whatever it is, I do think it's more palatable over 2 nights than one.
But that whole week, it's harrowing to me. And look, I love wrestling, but you've got the NXT takeover 2 nights. 2 nights of NXT.
Yeah, I think there's like 9 straight nights of WWE programming.
Yeah, you got 2 nights of WrestleMania. You got the Hall of Fame. You got Raw. You got SmackDown. It's like every single day. And look, fatigue is an issue here. You know what I mean? It just feels like too much. It just keeps getting more and more bloated at a time when the creative is the weakest it's ever been in the history of the company.
Yeah, I agree. And I usually say that, and I think it might still be the case that WWE puts forth its best creative leading up to WrestleMania. And I think historically that's in part because wrestlers take more ownership of their storylines leading up to WrestleMania. And I think there's some of that this year. Some stuff is fine. But by and large, yeah, the company still creatively really suffering, right now, which takes us to Randy Orton versus The Fiend. I want to know when this match is on, just so I could do something else. I don't exaggerate because I am going to be watching. Of course, I'm going to be watching. But I hate this. I think it's terrible. I think everything these two have done together now, dating back for years, has been terrible. At this point, it almost feels like a rib, like they're just kind of messing with fans, because remember, these two had a match years ago at WrestleMania, and it was horrendous. And they followed up with that other haunted house match, remember, where Randy was in the haunted house shaved, and then came out to the ring with a 5 o'clock shadow, or vice versa, something like that. And everything they've done since. I mean, these two, I have issues with each of them as performers on their own, and together they're just absolutely toxic. The worst combination I can remember in a long time. And I don't know what they're thinking pairing them together at WrestleMania.
Yeah, I kind of had like this weird psychological response during that match where I just didn't want to be in the room. Like I kept finding excuses to do other things, like, and I had people over. We're all, because it was like wrestling doubleheader, the 2 pay-per-views. Yeah. And they're like, "Hey, Brian, where you coming back?" "Oh yeah, I gotta do this thing." And in my head, I'm thinking, I'm literally just avoiding having to look at this because, and I watched part of it, and then I went back later and saw, most of it. And it's like, we've talked about this, and I don't know if you had the same experience of going on Twitter and people are, like going crazy about it and loving it and doing somersaults over it. But this stuff is just not for me. And I don't know if there's an indication right now that it's really for anybody at this point. Like, I don't know. I'm not in touch.
Yeah.
With that part of the fan base that seems to like this kind of thing. I'm just not. And the climbing out through the canvas, like that was cool 25 years ago, when The Undertaker did it, and they've done it 80 million times since.
Yeah, there was no bit of this that I liked, and my version of what you did there was I was live tweeting it for the magazine, and just ignored this match. So I just didn't tweet about this match because I had nothing good to say, and anything I would say, I know I'd end up getting with a bunch of fights with fans. So if you have nothing nice to say, so just on to the next match.
Well, I have an interesting perspective on this, and something I wanted to add is that, I have a lot of different people that I invite over usually to watch pay-per-views with me. And a few of them are not really, they're not people that hate wrestling, but they don't really watch it on their own. And so they're not as kind of smartened up to everything, and they don't know all the insider stuff, and they're just there to watch a good show. And generally, some of these people, they're older people, older than me, friends of the family, and they like to kind of get into the action. And they like to kind of suspend disbelief a little bit because it's fun in the way that, we all used to do. And when they see something like this, it's like they look at me and they're just like, "Please explain this to me. I don't understand. Like, what am I supposed to be making of this? Why is this happening right now?" And I'm thinking, there's a lot of people out there doing that same thing. And those people are not on Twitter, but there's a lot of them. And if we're thinking that WWE's is skewing so heavily now into 40s and 50s and people, there's got to be a lot of scratching of heads going on when they do things like this.
Yeah. The one upside, I guess, because of all that, of having this match at WrestleMania is that they're going to get a reaction. So they will find out. I mean, that's been one of the real questions, mysteries over the last year is, we've talked about that, as it relates to Drew McIntyre a lot, is he really over or not? He's been the top guy in a time where there haven't been fans. You haven't had that focus group of fans every night to tell you whether somebody's over or not. And I think that's also the case for a lot of this gimmickry, cinematic wrestling, all that. So I don't know what kind of match is going to be. They might do the Funhouse match, which wouldn't be in front of fans anyway, but fans will be there. They'll be watching on a screen, and somebody's going to be listening to them. So we'll see. And I don't know. Maybe they get a good reaction. What I hope is that it's completely rejected by fans, that WWE kind of gets the message and pulls back from this quite a bit, because there's stuff that you really like, there's stuff you like less, there's stuff that you really don't like, and then there's this, which is kind of this whole other category that it's some of the worst WWE programming I've seen in my life. It's unpleasant in every way to watch. So something that is much more pleasant, and we both were watching on a Sunday night. It sounds like a fair amount of people were also, is the return of the NWA. It's been a while since we've gotten a chance to talk about them here. Back for the Attack. It's first we've seen them in about a year, but for some of those shows they ran with UWN. Mm-hmm. Most of the crew was there. Maybe it was exaggerated a little bit about how many guys they lost, but they're definitely missing some important pieces. A new announced team for the most part. What did you think overall? Did this feel like the NWA that we both enjoyed so much before they went off the air last year?
I first want to say, and I'm biased here again, but the loss of David Marquez.
The big one.
That is a big one. And yes, I do have an article about David and his UWN coming out in the next issue of PWI. And one of the reasons I wanted to do that article, which is ironic now, is that partly that I felt like he's been such a great asset for the NWA. And that even goes behind the scenes, but most fans don't know about that. But even in front of the camera, you know, he was a pro. He was a real, like, especially because they're going for that vintage feel. He's your throwback. He's like the modern day Mean Gene. You know, he's got that vibe of like, and instead what they've got now is they're copying, you know, Impact and WWE and whatever, you know, they've got like the girl with the tattoos reading off cue cards, you know, and the jacked up, you know, wrestler announcer guy. And it feels like they may be wanting to move away from that kind of 80s aesthetic a little bit. And I don't know if that's the smartest thing, because that was one of their biggest selling points.
I was just watching, I didn't see all of it, but the first few minutes of the new episode of Power that just debuted today, and joining the announce team is Velvet Sky, which it goes to what you're saying, you know, and there's nothing wrong with Velvet Sky, but I don't know if you're a big Facts of Life fan. I am, going back to the 80s. So I will throw out a very dated reference, but there was an episode of Facts of Life where Joe was making pizzas. Do you remember this? And this was like her mother's recipe for pizzas, right? And they were really popular, but they got so hot, and demand got so hot that, like, well, maybe let's swap out the tomatoes that we grow in the backyard for some canned tomato sauce. And it's too expensive to get all this cheese that's like, you know, natural organic cheese. So let's just get the stuff you get at the supermarket. And it just became a completely different pizza. And that sort of feels like, I don't want to exaggerate too much, but it feels like, you know, we're losing that Polnicek pizza of the NWA, in that the pieces are in place. Most of the pieces are in place for what we loved about Power. And so, all right, it's not Marquez, it's another guy, but you're still kind of doing the same stuff. And it's not, you know, Jim Cornette was the first one to go, but we have another guy who's as good as Jim Cornette. And, you know, and certainly it's not Ricky Starks, it's Chris Adonis, you know him, or a lot of these XW guys. And so it's like the pieces are there. Most of it kind of still looks like the NWA from a year ago in Power, but it's lost some of that authenticity, and I don't know how they get it back. I mean, there's, you know, I suppose you can give Jim Cornette a call, but I understand why you wouldn't want to, or David Marquez, but I do think that they need to be careful of sacrificing too much and realize that it wasn't just the formula or the graphics or the production, but it was a lot of the personalities. They had the right people, and they're stepping way too far from that. You know, they put Austin Idol there on Sunday night, and I think they thought that was great. I didn't think he was very good.
I love him.
Tyrus. Well, it was horrendous. You know,
Tyrus was bad. But Austin Idol, I loved. That I will say. I loved having him there. I think he's always gold on the mic. He's one of the few guys from that era who could still really go like that from a promo point of view. I thought he was going to get a little more involved. I believe one of the reasons that he's heavily involved is that his wrestling school, is one of the sponsors of Power. So that might be why they haven't. Yeah. But, you know, he's a link to the past. You know, he was a Georgia Championship Wrestling guy and all that. And so he's wrestled in that studio many, many, many times. But the big link that they still have right now is the fact that it's in Techwood Studios. It's in that space. But they do seem to be consciously moving away from that whole vibe. Like, I may be wrong. I don't know if I wasn't paying close enough attention, but they didn't have the same kind of like, I guess they call them chirons on the screen, like the way that the words would appear, and it was in a very 80s style that they had been doing it in terms of like putting people's names on the screen, and having a ring announcer, because what they were doing is they were copying the old studio style, which was that they were just announced in the ring.
Right.
Like they had like the commentators would just announce them, and there wasn't like a big bombastic ring announcer. And now they're doing that too. So I do think that's a conscious choice, I guess. I mean, it's what they're trying to do.
Yeah. I do think that there's some names and partnerships out there. I'd like to see them, and you got to be careful with all these, but maybe explore some of those partnerships with, they've lent talent to, I don't know if you call it lending talent, but we know that the NWA titles have been defended on the AEW. It would be a huge boost to them if Kenny Omega makes an appearance, challenges Nick Aldis for the NWA title. You got to think that's one direction they want to go.
I thought watching it, I was thinking, well, this would be the time to do it. I mean, the NWA has been giving them talent. I mean, this is the time for AEW to step up and send a few people down there. And I don't know, you can't imagine that it didn't come up. I mean, they had to.
It's gotta be planned. And for all I know, it happened on Power today. I got to go back and watch the episode.
I was almost thinking that maybe they wouldn't want to. I mean, maybe the thinking is that they don't want to be perceived as small time. I mean, Impact is one thing, but the NWA is even lower profile than Impact. So I don't know. I hope they're not thinking that, because I think it would be great. And I think it opens the door for all this also to come on Dynamite, which is, it's about time that has happened, because, he's awesome. Me, he's the best talent that they've got. But Thunder Rosa at this point is a much bigger name because of her exposure on Dynamite. And she's, she was the biggest star on the show. I think I would love to see them have the cross promotion go both ways, because I mean, they're both great. Aldis is a top level major league main event caliber performer, and he deserves to have a bigger spotlight right now.
Yeah. Another thing, and we've talked about this relative to AEW, but I think right now it's a bigger concern for NWA. They really need to sort of check themselves as far as just going after anybody who used to work for WWE. And they were good, I thought, a year ago in tapping into guys who had that WWE resume, but maybe were kind of underutilized. I heard Nick Aldis talk about wanting to bring in Joe Hennig, the former, what do they call him? Curtis Axel. I think it'd be a good get. I'd like to see that. I think that's a worthwhile, that feels like a good NWA fit. But what are you doing with Tyrus? What are you doing with the former Chris Masters? These guys are long in the tooth. In their with all due respect, in their best days, they weren't that big stars. Now they're a lot older. Tyrus looked as bad as I've seen anybody look in a pro wrestling ring in a long time. Just really, really out of shape, winded, couldn't execute the simplest move, and they put him over. A guy who I thought they had some high hopes for in J.R. Kratos. So they really need to back off of that. I mean, I get it's kind of like the old indie mentality. You bring in these guys who have some notoriety and it'll get a few more people into the door. But I just can't imagine anybody is buying a pay-per-view because Tyrus is on.
Yeah, I agree. And it's some of the choices they made, like you said, having Tyrus go over. I mean, you can see that coming because they just brought him in. I thought it was weird that Chris Adonis didn't win the title from Trevor Murdoch for the same reason. Not that I would have been, cheering for that to happen, but it seemed odd. And also the fact that Thunder Rosa lost. I mean, that was, in my mind, that's a huge upset because that's the biggest star on the show.
Yeah, but I think Camille's got a big upside too. I think they're smart to protect Camille.
Oh no, I'm a big fan of hers. I mean, obviously she's still, a little green. She needs some time. She has an incredible look. And I think she's another one that it's a matter of time where somebody is going to snatch her up, in my opinion, most likely WWE at some point when they feel that she's ready. I think she's somebody that people are keeping an eye on right now. But the fact that she went over in that way, it almost made me think that maybe AEW has finally locked down Thunder Rosa into some kind of an exclusive deal. And she was kind of doing that on the way out.
Maybe, yeah. Any issue with the business plan now moving over to Fight TV, $5 a month to watch Power? I'm on some of these Facebook groups, and there's been a lot of debate about it. And on one hand, you've got people saying, "Oh, come on, what's $5? It's a couple cups of coffee in a month." On the other hand, I think people's expectations for what you get for your streaming dollar are a lot different than they used to be. I mean, now you could watch WrestleMania for $5 a month and get all of WWE Network and all of Peacock also. And what NWA is offering is, I don't know why, but they say 3 episodes a month of Power, which thankfully is only an hour, but it is only an hour. So I get that they got to keep the lights on, but I do wonder about that price point. I wonder if they'd be better off with a 6-month package, an annual package, or whatever that would be, rather than $5 a month.
Yeah, because it may be a cup of coffee, but there's a lot of those cups of coffee flying around right now with all these platforms, and It adds up for people. I'll buy it. I'm planning to do it. I just, I don't think this is something they'd be doing if they didn't feel like they really, really had to, because, when they started, they were very much all about, hey, this is free to watch. We're on YouTube. We don't have a TV platform yet, but it's free for you to watch. And that was something that they seem to be very proud of being able to deliver to get themselves off the ground. And so right now, when they're in a weakened state, I can't imagine this was their preferred way to do it. But I think it must be a situation where they absolutely need the capital, or they're going to have to fold.
Yeah, and I guess they'll find what that sweet spot is, But even on Fight TV, you see like a Ring of Honor, $10 a month. And granted, they're not doing house shows anymore, but the Honor Club, I think, is $10 a month, and you get every house show, every TV show, and pay-per-views. Wrestling math is kind of, and streaming math, is a lot different. For $5 isn't a lot, but I think there's expectations that for $5 you're going to give me plenty.
Revolution costs $50 by itself. I mean, that's crazy to think about.
Right. Yeah, and that was it. It shows you how much things have changed, right? I mean, UFC is still charging. They might have just increased the price. I think it's like $65 on pay-per-view, and on top of that, you have to subscribe to ESPN Plus to be able to watch it. So, maybe wrestling fans have just gotten too spoiled, Well,
I think UFC also, there's a lot of crossover into boxing fans and people that are used to paying for boxing. I mean, that is not a sport you can follow unless you have a lot of disposable income. And so I think there's some overlap there in terms of like fight fans, that are more willing to spend that kind of money for something like that. It's a little different from wrestling.
Yeah. In a way, it's I don't want to say a disservice, but one thing WWE has done that I wonder if they could take back is that they did reduce fans' expectations so low. The WWE Network is now 7 years old. And it's only gone down in price. I remember when it came out back in 2014, I thought $10 a month. There's no way this is going to last, and it has lasted, and now it's half that on Peacock. And actually, if you sign up now, which I did, it's $250 for 4 months. So
you could use that extra money that you're going to save now on the network. You can invest in the NWA on Fight TV.
Yes. I thought that was going to be a book plug for you. You could set it aside for the upcoming biography of the Sheik.
Which, by the way, since you've segued into that, I would like to say that I finished writing the manuscript yesterday. I officially finished the hardest part of the process. So there's still a year to go before it comes out. My biography of the original Sheik that I'm writing, to clarify, Blood and Fire. But I did finish the manuscript last night, so that's a big weight off my shoulders.
There was just some news right out of his family. Didn't he just lose a brother or something?
Yeah, his son, and that was very surreal. So the Sheik, the original Sheik, his oldest son, Ed Farhat Jr., who actually used to wrestle in the Detroit territory as Captain Ed George. If you ever saw the movie I Like to Hurt People, he's all over that movie. But I had been kind of going back and forth with him to see if he would help me with the book in terms of, talking about his dad and photography from the family and things. And he had been very, very reluctant and cautious. And historically, he's been that way. That's always what I heard, because it's a very, his dad was very, very secretive of his real life. And I think there's a sense of like, if anybody's ever going to tell his story, it should be us, meaning the family. So, we went back and forth. It was never contentious, but he really was not interested in the end. And he just lost his brother, the Sheik's other son, Tommy. He died last October. And once that happened, he died of kidney cancer. Ed Farhat, Eddie Jr., he just had no interest in doing anything. And from what I understand, he had COVID, which is horrible.
Wow. Tragic.
And he had been very vocal about like obeying, health restrictions for COVID. It was like one of his top causes on social media. And he apparently caught it. And he would have been 71 tomorrow. And he died, but he died the morning of the day that I finished writing the book, which is very strange to me. But life is weird.
Yep. Yeah. Well, our condolences to his family. All right, Brian. Thanks so much. A lot of fun. It's been a while since we had to catch up, and now that we are in WrestleMania season, I expect to check in with you more often.
Yes, absolutely. Thanks, Al. As always.
Want to thank Brian Solomon, as always, for joining me on a fun conversation. Right now, let's go to another conversation I recently had. It is featured in the latest issue of Pro Wrestling Illustrated. It's our hot seat interview. Here is WWE official Adam Pearce.
Hey, Adam, how's it going?
Hey, Al, what's going on, dude? How you been?
Good. Long time no speak.
Yeah, but that's all right. Old friends reconnecting.
Absolutely. So just before I got on with you, I looked up the interview that we did. I guess it's going on 11 years ago for magazine, and I remember it went really well, but I didn't remember that much from it. And I found it, and I got a kick out of the opening line.
So
it said, over the past several years, Adam Pearce has gone from losing opening card matches in Ring of Honor to becoming one of the most influential and respected personalities in the sport of wrestling, and yet many fans may never have heard of him. And so I thought it's funny because all these years later, I feel like it's almost, we're back to that again. And again, you're a guy who's now getting a ton of TV time, and the reality is that even 10 years after that, a lot of people don't know who you are. So what do you make of this? I mean, you couldn't have expected that at this stage of your career, you'd be getting more notoriety, more screen time than ever before, and not necessarily even wrestling.
I think this goes to show that the old adage, the more things change, the more things stay the same, is exactly true, right? That is hilarious. And it's funny you bring that up. I remember doing the interview. Never would I have guessed that was the opening line, because you could literally cut and paste that and use it today. It's pretty incredible. It's been a heck of a journey.
Yeah. So how do you get here? I mean, another thing that struck me about that interview was, talking about how you, from 11 years ago, talk about how you ended up part of the creative team, the creative head of Ring of Honor. And there's a couple times where you talked about how you couldn't help but stick your nose in creative, and you couldn't stay quiet. You had to be the one to speak up. So did some of that happen all these years later again in WWE, and did that have a hand in you getting the role that you have now?
I certainly think there's some semblance of truth to that. As a producer, even when I was hired in 2015, that was strictly as a coach at the Performance Center. And then along with those duties came, hey, and we noticed you did some TV at Ring of Honor, and then you fall into seeing that the process at NXT at that point was virtually identical to what I was used to. So in a lot of ways, and I said this to other people, me sliding into the Performance Center in NXT in 2015 was like putting on a glove. It was a perfect fit at the perfect time for me, and it allowed me to use the skills that I had built up in both Ring of Honor and Championship Wrestling from Hollywood on the television side to say hello to a new group of guys that had no idea that I had those skills. So with that, you kind of being used to that kind of process, obviously there's a ton of creative thought that goes into any television product. Of course, WWE is right alongside any of those. So yeah, I mean, the production meetings, I'm not a stranger to any of those. I sit in all of them, and I'm grateful to have an opinion that people want to hear. And sometimes that has an impact on the shows, and sometimes it doesn't. But just to be involved I think is probably one of the bigger honors. We're talking about Monday Night Raw, which is the longest running cable television episodic product. God, going on how many years now? You know what I mean? So just to have your fingerprints on the mainstream business that you love in very tangible ways I get so much more gratification out of that than I ever did winning a match, if that makes any sense.
Yeah. Is there any bit of you that is resentful for the fact that you get this opportunity now? I mean, it's sort of like ironic, like, well, here I was doing it for whatever it is, 25 years in the ring, and now you give me this chance, and obviously a different stage in your career. So, and any resentment towards the lost time, only I had gotten this break 15 years ago, 10 years ago.
Well, here's where I give you the soundbite that nobody believes. There isn't one shred of resentment about any part of my journey. The cool thing about my career is that everything that I've been able to do has all been by choice. I have literally done everything I've set out to do in professional wrestling and sports entertainment and on my own calendar. I worked for myself for 2 decades, which was incredible in and of itself that, number one, I could satisfy my economic needs in pro wrestling on my own without any mainstream machine behind me. But 2, once I got to a point where I needed to make a change because I had a family and I had children and it was time to grow up, I was well enough versed in the facets of our industry over that 2-decade period that my toolbox was full enough that I could come into WWE and work on things and be a part of that machine shop, if you will. And that made that journey, the 2 decades previous, even more gratifying because I feel like I did things the right way. I've always been incredibly honest with myself. I knew, and someone just asked me this the other day, a similar question to what you posed. I think the way they phrased it was, well, this is probably not the way you envisioned being a part of the TV shows in WWE. And I didn't take it as a backhanded compliment or even insulting in any way. And I said, no, I said, not to correct you, but I'll correct you. It's exactly how I saw myself being a part of this going forward. Because I didn't and don't have the physical stature that a lot of these guys do. Again, I just very realistic along the journey with what I was capable of. And listen, there were a ton of locker rooms on the independent scene where I was the best wrestler in the room. And there were a ton of locker rooms on the independent scene where I wasn't. And I always figured that my real value was going to be behind the camera, behind the curtain, coaching, that kind of thing. That's the future I saw for myself, God, even 10, 15 years ago. There's a reason why I never really pursued WWE as a talent. I mean, and a real reason why I turned down WCW more than once. So it's hard to look in the mirror sometimes for some people when you love what you're doing and you have a dream. And I'm not saying I never had those dreams. I just knew that I could attain something different and end up in the same spot. Never did I would be standing in the main event of SmackDown live on Fox with Roman Reigns. But that just happened.
Yeah, that was weird. Did you ever deal with any issues of pushback from WWE superstars, maybe younger ones, not as familiar with your body of work, in them sort of questioning your credibility? Who are you to give me advice? You never made it to the show. That kind of thing. Right. Yeah.
I was afraid of that when I got hired. And just being transparent, that's one of the things that I thought I would run into a lot. And what I ended up finding was the opposite. And I think the reason that I did is because so many of the wrestlers that younger generation who may not be or may not have been as familiar with me, what they really did admire and what they really did look up to was your Daniel Bryan, Cesaros, and your CM Punks and the likes. And it wasn't 6 degrees of separation. It was 1 degree of separation because I shared locker rooms with all those guys. And I can't tell you how impactful it can be when you come into a camp and there's a Jerry Briscoe who everybody's been conditioned to really respect, and rightfully so. There's a reason I call him Dad. But when people like Jerry Briscoe, and it happened today, when they run up to you in the PC and they give you a hug, even those who may not be as familiar with you as they are with a Jerry Briscoe or a Daniel Bryan or a Finn Balor, when your peers are coming up to you and you're giving you the hug, giving you the rub, giving you the accolade, giving you the brother talk, the handshake, you know what I mean? Like, when you earn the respect of your peers, even if someone isn't familiar with you specifically, they get acquainted really quick as to why is that happening. So I never got that pushback because I had everybody who they looked up to saying the right things.
Yeah.
And that made the transition that much easier.
The other side of that is I wonder if you've dealt with any resentment or even just on your own, any uneasiness from all the praise you've gotten, right? So you only become a TV character sort of accidentally in the last several months, and almost from day one, you're getting praise as one of the best characters on television and one of the best talkers, that kind of thing. Any bit of you kind of get self-conscious that you're getting all this praise?
I want to be careful how I answer this because you don't want to come off sounding, smug or arrogant. Listen, I'm very confident in the body work and, again, the tools that I've been able to put in my toolbox over now a quarter century, which makes me feel really old. So I've never doubted myself. I've never gone into a situation or been given a task or asked if I could pull something off that I didn't think I could. And going a step further, if there was something I really didn't think I would do well, I would suggest somebody who I thought was better for the role. Again, that's part of being honest about what you have, what you can do, and more importantly, what you can't. So, I guess the only cold feet, if you will, I said to Roman last week before we went out there, I said, hey, I just want to apologize now. I said, it's been a while since I've thrown a right hand, so this one might be in there a little tighter than you're used to. And he said, as long as you don't knock out my pearly whites, we're good. So thankfully everything was good. But like riding a bike, man. I learned how to ride a bike, and I learned how to ride a bike without any hands. You know what I mean? And I can still ride.
Well, I saw some of what you posted on Facebook over the last few weeks after you they put you in this program with Roman Reigns, and I sensed a real gratification over the reaction. Were you surprised? I mean, there were absolutely those folks that were like, what? Why? What is Adam Pearce doing in this program? And Adam Pearce versus Roman Reigns. And then there were a whole bunch of other people who were like, yeah, absolutely. This is great. I can't wait to see him back in the ring. So
well,
what was it like for you?
You could put me you can mark me down in the first column because when it was first broached, it was like a big what? Because listen, I haven't been shy about the fact that in a personal sense, I have zero, and maybe that's why it's so much fun. I have zero interest in being a full-time wrestler ever again in my life. Zero. Less than zero. You know what I mean? So everything that's happening and has happened to this point has been the proverbial cliche icing on the cake in a very real and literal sense for me. I'm having the time of my life doing this now, mostly because I don't have to do it to make a living anymore. And it's really gratifying to be in there with the very best in our profession, whether you're talking about Roman or whether you're talking about Paul Heyman or on the Raw side. I had some interactions with Randy Orton not too long ago that could have and may still go somewhere further too. Like, this is the cream of the crop, man, and I get to kind of ply my trade and match wits and, clang swords with these guys. I never thought that was going to happen. So whatever ends up happening is perfect, in the perfect, coming around the full circle, if you will. It's been amazing.
So another reason why this whole ride's kind of been unlikely is that you step into a role that I think a lot of fans thought, they've seen enough of, right? The authority figure. Mm-hmm. And as soon as they see Adam Pearce, and I don't think they've called you anything other than WWE official, but
that's right.
To the role, and just whether it's Mr. McMahon or Eric Bischoff or every incarnation we've seen, there's a feeling that this has been done to death. And yet, again, I think the reviews have largely been very good, and there is a feeling that you've taken kind of a new twist on this. So what was your approach in taking on this role, and were you kind of aware of the fact that this is something that has been done so much?
Well, I think, first of all, from a personal standpoint, it's a departure from some of the characters you mentioned already. I think largely the authority figure role in recent years especially has been that of someone who looks down their nose. They're the establishment. They're the authority. They're the kind of overarching controller of everything that doesn't hesitate to put their foot on the throat of everyone under them. And I'm really the opposite of that, in the sense that I am WWE official. I am not a general manager. There are no general managers. So I don't have necessarily the power that would be as absolute as it has been in the past. And perhaps because of that, I'm not as corrupted by that power. So I've always tried to, given what the marching orders tend to be, to play it as straight as I can and to be as impartial as I can, given, again, what the marching orders are. And I think that in and of itself is so different from an attitudinal standpoint from what people are used to from this kind of character, that it, by definition, is different. And it doesn't feel the same because it isn't. And I think it allows me a latitude to kind of take this wherever it goes organically on its own, as opposed to being driven by what might be on paper. You know what I mean? So we'll see where it goes. A lot of that I don't know. So it's interesting. It's fun and it's fresh, and I hope it continues to feel that way for everybody.
One little thing, I don't know if there's a question here, but maybe more of just an observation and a compliment, but that first exchange with Roman Reigns where he's really trying to intimidate you, and frankly, one criticism I have of WWE a lot these days is that reactions don't feel authentic, and yours felt so authentic, right? When it wasn't that cliched sort of cowering, and it wasn't also trying to be tougher than you knew you were. You said something to the effect of, "What are we doing here, man?" And that's exactly how somebody in your position would react in that situation. I thought it was so authentic. So well done.
I appreciate it.
Yeah. The other thing that makes this all so strange is that, and this, I'm sure you talk about how this is exactly how you would have wanted it, but I can't imagine you could have predicted that this run would come in front of a virtual screen with, hundreds of fans on digital fans virtually there. So does that offset some of how awesome this is, that it's basically in front of empty arenas?
Actually, I look at it the opposite, because I really thought, and I could be wrong, but I have the impression that if there were live human beings in the seats, especially live human beings conditioned and used to WWE product over a substantial amount of time, that I don't know that WWE official Adam Pearce would have gotten a chance to get as far as it has gotten. I think anytime you see an authority figure again, you're used to expecting a certain typecast, if you will, that you want to boo it immediately. And I think if there were real human beings in the seats, that's exactly what would have happened. And I don't know if that automatically pushes you in a direction to make it feel as same old WWE authority figure, or if you push away from it and go, maybe we don't want to do this. You know what I mean? Because I do think the intention was to have a respectable authority that can make reasonable decisions on the show. And frankly, I think that was missing for a lot of the time, because you don't necessarily want that person to be good or bad or indifferent. You just want them to make the right choice given the situation. And I don't know if there's real fans in the seats if they would have given me the opportunity to do that, whether we scripted it or not.
Is there an authority figure over the years that you drew inspiration from, whether it was, Jack Tunney or...
Ding, ding, ding.
Is that it? Yeah, I mean, more kind of
Jack Tunney.
sort of straight-laced, right?
Yeah, man, Jack Tunney was my WWF president, right? You know, and for people my age anyhow, yeah, that was it. That to me, Gorilla Monsoon, I guess, could be another one. I always appreciated someone in that Paul Tagliabue, NFL commissioner, Ron Wolf, Green Bay Packer general manager, straight shooter, cut to the chase, make the best decision as fast as you can, be as impartial as you can. You know, those are kind of my takeaways when I think about who I try to pattern my attitudes after. If you go back and watch some old Paul Tagliabue and Pete Rozelle stuff, maybe not as flashy or as flamboyant from a personality standpoint, on purpose, by the way. But, yeah, Jack Tunney, man, he's my forever president.
Yeah. With a few minutes we got here, I wanted to ask you about a couple of things outside WWE that I think are relevant to you. One is the NWA. For so long, you were kind of the face of the NWA and one of the many incarnations of sort of a reboot. And now you've seen what Billy Corgan has done with it over the last couple of years. A lot of praise for the NWA power, and
right.
They were derailed with the pandemic. What do you, just from an observer, what do you make of it? And as a guy who I know really valued the lineage of the NWA, do you like what you've seen?
Well, I think it's 6 of one, half a dozen of the other for me. And the reason I say that is because of something you brought up. The pandemic, I think, derailed momentum, not just for WWE or the NWA, but I think for the industry as a whole. This has forced everybody to either adapt or put things aside. And I think, unfortunately, for a lot of my friends that were working with the NWA, they kind of shelved everything, right? So it's interesting to see what will happen as the world returns to a more normal, whatever that ends up being, a more normal state of affairs. But yeah, you hit the nail on the head. I don't think I am working where I am today without Ring of Honor, which allowed me to first be an executive producer, quote unquote, or the NWA, which put me at the top of the mountain as a talent. I wish everybody the best. I got so many friends and people that I've come across over the last 25 years that work in all these various places, and everyone has been impacted in one way or another. Unfortunately, the majority of that has been in a negative manner. And I just want that to change for everybody. Yeah. I think the world feels the same.
And you obviously had an experience with COVID. Most having dealt with it. Can you talk a bit about that? And in retrospect, do you look back on anything you did or the company did that, we've seen Drew McIntyre talk about it, and he's been very open about it. What, if any, lessons did you take away from your experience?
Well, listen, when I got sick, it was, the end of June. I found out on my 42nd birthday. Happy birthday to me. And I feel fortunate looking back. Now, I did get sick, and it was awful for about a week, but I recovered, and my family had varying degrees of COVID illness. And I don't know what I could have done in that time to have prevented it. I think that the company has done a wonderful job along the way of adapting to and changing our policies when they needed to be. And like the entire world, not having any breadth of experience with this thing because it was brand new, everyone has had to adjust and react in real time. And I think we've done a really good job about doing that. Most of that, my opinion, comes from having personal accountability. If you know there's a communicable disease out there and you don't want to put somebody at risk, then you don't undertake those kind of things that are going to put you in a position to do just that. So I have lived, thankfully, I like the house that I bought because I have been living in this thing and looking at these walls for pretty much a year, and it still didn't prevent me from getting sick. I'm just thankful that I didn't get anybody else sick. And then once I recovered, I still had antibodies, which is awesome. Again, we're learning as we go along with this thing. So you have to adapt, and you've got to be selfless, and you've got to think about your neighbors, and you've got to think about the people that your children interact with. I'm fortunate that my children are able to go to school when so many kids across the country still are dealing with virtual education. And we did that at the end of school year last year, and it was awful, I think, from not to get into child psychology, but I just watched my kids who blossom and blossom and blossom, and then all of a sudden they're shelled, you know. Mm-hmm. And I'm thankful to our school districts and the people around our community that, by and large, everybody does the right thing, and as a result, we're all healthy.
Yeah. Just to go full circle here back to that interview from 2010, because I really had a lot of fun going through it, and so much of it really holds up. I mean, there's a bit where you talk about how Ring of Honor, this was right after you had left Ring of Honor, and talk about how they got to get away from the DVDs, and the future is in, I think you called it like downloadable video like they do in Netflix, something like that. And a lot of stuff like that. You talked about how they need to get with it and go HD, improve the lighting. And there's a line here, I thought, and I've been adamant from the beginning, that if and when Ring of Honor finally closes its doors, the wrestling side of it, the in-ring, the native, is never going to be the reason why. So even that, I think, was really forward-looking, that, you know, it's not enough just to be the company that has the really athletic wrestling. So talking about Ring of Honor, when you see what they've become, and they've had their ups and downs, would you like to think that you had, you know, some small piece, your fingerprints are still on what they eventually became?
Oh, I think so. You know, and I don't follow the product closely anymore. It's hard when you have your quote unquote baby, and then you got to step away from it, and it's gone and done its own thing. But just hearing you read that line from that interview from 11 years ago, I wish I would have coined the term streaming service. I could not have just said streaming service. God, what did I say? Downloadable video content? That's too wordy.
Like they do on Netflix. Something like
they do on Netflix. Good Lord. That's funny. Netflix was around 11 years ago. There we go.
I think it's still shipping DVDs, but
exactly. Yeah, no, I'm still buddies with a lot of people that are working in Ring of Honor, so I know that they learned to do this process the same time I did. So yeah, we kind of all came up and got our fingerprints working on that machine in the same way at the same time. So I know that a lot of those lessons from way back when are still being used today.
Yeah. How do you feel about WWE in 2021? I know there's hopes to put some button seats at WrestleMania. Or are you fully optimistic about what this year's going to look like?
I would love for that to happen. I think the magic of sports entertainment or professional wrestling, whichever way you want to term it, magic isn't so much what happens in the ring as much as what the people outside the ring do with their reactions to it. That's the majesty of our industry. And for an entire year, that's been missing, and we've had to try to replicate it or manufacture it in a way so that it feels natural. And I'm not certain anyone has done that. You know, there are times where I'll be watching something, whether live or on TV, and I go, man, that felt good, but I know that it's inauthentic, and it doesn't feel like it would have if this place was full. You know what I mean? And some of those iconic moments that you get when you scroll back through the wrestling annals of the WWE Network, and you look back on those real keynote signature moments, it's going to look weird in 10 years when you're looking at these retrospective video packages, and you're going to see snapshots of LED boards and faces on screens, and it's not going to match everything else.
Yeah.
I just hope that going forward we see less LED boards and more human eyes reacting to what their superstars are doing in the ring. That really is the incredible magic, the interplay between the wrestler and the person that loves that wrestler. You can't replicate that in any way, shape, or form.
Has it become even more important to do that because there's the possibility for you having your own WrestleMania moment this year?
How hilarious would that be? I said this to Paul Heyman the other day. Talk about things you never thought you would ever even imagine or think of. Paul Heyman versus Adam Pearce advertised for the main event of SmackDown. What is this bizarre world we're living in? You know, so that would be hilarious. That would certainly be on the list of things I never imagined for myself. You know, you resign yourself to a certain fate when you decide that you're going to put your boots away and you're going to step into another role. Whether you want that other role or not, that closes the door, you know. At least you think it does until it doesn't. So who knows? Who knows? anything can happen, as what someone once said about WWE.
Yeah. All right, Adam, this was a lot of fun. Good catching up with you. Let's not wait another 11 years to do it again.
I appreciate it, man. Yeah, and that's on you. You know how to get a hold of me.
Okay, man, I'll send you a link. I think we're Facebook friends. I'll send you a link to the original interview. It's a lot of fun to go through.
That sounds great.
All right, Adam, thank you. Appreciate it.
Thank you, sir.